Hey everybody, welcome back to Electoral Dysfunction, the show where comedians and experts debate the news of the week from the safety of their quarantines. I'm your host, Tom Brennan. Thank you for joining us for another week. And it's been a sad week for me. My Uncle Joe, who I mentioned a few weeks ago on an episode, passed away. He's 94, also known to the world as Brother Hugh McGuire. He's one of the Christian Brothers, a Catholic monastic order. And he was the youngest son of 6 kids. He never had any children of his own, but he had so many nieces and nephews and grandnieces and grandnephews and great-grandnieces and great-grandnephews at a certain point that he might as well have had kids. And hearts are broken across Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, across New Jersey, New York, Missouri, North Carolina, I'm sure many more states this week. This was a guy who, the thing that most stands out to me, was the first time he had to sit down with one of his nieces and nephews and tell them that their parent had died. They were in high school. And the last time he had to comfort a niece and nephew and their parents died, the niece and nephew were senior citizens. And that alone is such an impressive and incredible thing to me. But he dedicated his life to taking care of people. He cared about the poor. Into his later years in life, he worked in the De La Salle schools in Philadelphia, which were for court-adjudicated kids who either had to go to jail or go to the De La Salle schools. And he really cared about those kids. He loved them. He did everything he could to help them get on the right path. A lot of my politics are inspired by him. Back when the Catholic Church would let people run for office, he ran for city council in Philadelphia. He was a bit of a troublemaker. I remember a few years ago, he won an award and we all went to go see him. And when he went up to get his award from the bishop whispered something to him. And he later told us it was the bishop had whispered, "Are you going to behave now?" And my uncle said, "Of course." The thing I'll never forget, 2006, I was working for CBS News. I was working on their elections unit and on the midterms. And my Aunt Mary, Joe's oldest sister, died right before the midterms, and the funeral was the day after the midterms. And so I worked until 5 a.m. that night, and I got on the train, went straight down to Philly, and I get to the funeral, and everyone's, of course, very sad. Mary was a lovely woman. Joe makes a beeline for me and goes, "Rick Santorum got creamed last night," and we high-fived. He was a good man, and we're all going to miss him. It's funny, he had a hard time saying "I love you," which is weird because he wasn't like an uptight guy. He was a very outgoing, gregarious guy, but just of a generation where men didn't say "I love you," I guess. And it used to irk my cousins that he'd always say, "Well, I'll see ya." And finally, one of my cousins was like, "That's what he means. He means I love you when he says, 'Well, I'll see ya.'" So I guess Uncle Joe, Brother Hugh, former port chaplain of the city of Philadelphia and a good man, I'll see ya. And join me in welcoming this week's panel. First up, very excited to have her back. She's the policy director for the U.S. Federation of Workers and a proud Philadelphian. Mo Mankland Kingston is on. Hey, Mo, how are you?
Hey, I feel like a champion here in Philadelphia. Everyone happy to accept your thanks for democracy.
Look, you're where democracy was born. You're where it could have died, but you kept it on life support for a few more weeks. So good work.
Let's limp into 2021.
Greatly appreciated. Also coming to us from the now greatest city in the world, Philadelphia, comedian and writer Chip Trantry is here. Hey, Chip, how are you?
I'm doing great. Again, just like Mo, we are fielding any thanks and praise that wants to be heaped upon us. I'll take it. I will take it.
I'm really glad you guys were the one that put him over the top, because I feel like your city always needs a grudge to hold against everyone else. And now, like, you've got another one. You're like, we had to do it because none of you could get it together. So
exactly.
This will power you guys through. Also with us, fair weather comedian, snack hero, and creative content for change.org, Shreya Sarkar is with us. Hey, Shreya, how are you?
I'm well. How are you, Tom?
I'm good. Here we are in a city that didn't matter in this election.
Yeah. We're just still trying to coast by on our laurels from like 100 years ago when New York was great.
Yeah, when 100 years ago when New York was great. Uh, a lot of
The
of
good old days of Tammany Hall.
That's right. Yeah, those draft riots, man. That's what. Well, that was before then, but even so, I'll save that for
I
I'll
don't know
save that
about
for our podcast on the draft riots. Uh, also with us, writer, comedian, and hard dog lover, Keisha Zoller. Hey, Keisha, how are you?
I'm good. I love dogs. My city didn't matter at all. I'm in LA. Does
Yeah.
LA matter? Yes, because we have weather. Anyway, I
Yep.
hope I was like, can I just like take part of the Philly joy in the like democracy? Yes, but also gritty, which I love gritty. I know it's controversial, but I love chaos. I love chaos for good.
Yeah.
Even sexy gritty lady. Anyway.
I feel like I'm just going to take a minute to talk about gritty here. I love that, like, what was most definitely the idea that they're like, and they'll never pick this one, but let's throw it in, is the one that won in the mascots at the end. That's my favorite part of it. And finally, columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, Robert George. Robert, my friend, how are you?
Doing well, Tom. Doing well. Once again, great to be back here. Great to be keeping that electoral dysfunction vibe and spirit and energy and passion alive for God knows how many weeks we've been doing this.
Someone's really gunning for a good performance review at the end of the year from the show. So
There we go.
So 1 week ago, we sat down to record, and just before we sat down to record, Joe Biden was declared the winner of the 2020 presidential election. In the week that has passed, he has won the states of Arizona and Georgia, flipped 5 states from Republicans, got, in the words of the current administration, an electoral landslide with 306 electoral votes. But as we sit here today, the President of the United States, who is still, as of this recording, Donald John Trump, has not yet conceded. And I think I figured out how we get him to do it. I figured this out. I cracked this the other day. Here's how we get Donald Trump to concede the presidency. We tell him it's something Barack Obama never did. Boom. Problem solved. He's out.
This is true.
Oh,
That's genius.
You're welcome,
Yeah.
America.
There's a 50-50.
Yeah, you never know. But as we speak, he's still refusing to concede, though he came as close as possible during a press conference on Friday, where he talked about a COVID vaccine, where he almost mentioned the Biden administration, but has continued to say, we'll see. His supporters are floating the idea of Republican-controlled states electing a different slate of electors to the Electoral College. There's not really an indication that Republicans plan to go along with that. He's accused the Republican Secretary of State of Georgia of being, I guess, in cahoots with Stacey Abrams and Republican Governor Brian Kemp, famous friends, to swing the election against him. His followers and teams are out talking about dead people who voted, animals who voted. Dozens of his supporters have taken the streets of Washington, D.C. today to march in his honor. So the question is this, Keisha Zoller, we'll start with you. Are we in the middle of a stupid coup? Is that what's happening around us right now?
Oh, the stupidest. I've been saying this for months that I think we have to accept what a coup looks like and understand that there's ways of pushing someone out who is done. But even more than that, it's only comforting that they're so inept that, like, I mean, remember Four Seasons landscaping? Like, they're so inept that their administration is lazy comedy writing. The entire administration. So it's a coup, but it's like lazy comedy writing coup. It's like, let me just pump out a draft of whatever and be like, I'm going to say some stuff. But I do see it as a coup because it's like once the Proud Boys went full Nazi, I was like, well, this is going to be a problem forever. And I think that's the thing we all have to shift our brains around. Like, yay, coup, ooh, America's different and vocal now. Like, this has always been there, but we're now vocal about how bad things are, marching towards a cold civil war.
You could actually, Keisha, you could actually call it, given that a couple of the law firms, I mean the premium high-level law firms that had been representing the Trump campaign in Pennsylvania have basically kind of backed out because they realized that this is absolutely insane and completely nuts. So now Rudy Giuliani is officially running the show in terms of the legal fight. So,
sorry. I thought that was the punchline.
well, you see,
Rudy
I mean,
Giuliani.
this is right. I mean, the guy who helped engineer Donald Trump into becoming the third impeached president in history is now basically constructing legal strategy. So if so at the beginning of this week, I to be honest, at the beginning of this week, I really was nervous that there was a legally constructed coup being kind of put together that would have, for it to have worked, it would have meant that at least a couple of states would have had to have been litigated to such an extent that they would have been pushed into what is constitutionally called the safe harbor. That is to say, when states can safely send their electors into the electoral college to be recognized. For a brief moment, it looked like that was kind of the strategy that the Trump people were trying to do, except that it's a complete and total fiasco. They don't have their. At one point, they presented their case into a docket that it wasn't appropriate for, and they had to like rush back and tell the judge, "Oh, we're withdrawing this because we realized we weren't supposed to hand it in here." And then the judge says, "Well, there really is no like right to withdraw here, so I don't know exactly what your legal point is." So I have to disagree at one point with something Akeisha said. You said that this looks like it's lazy comedy writing. It actually looks like brilliant comedy writing in like the Veep sense, because you have to write really well to make characters this stupid and for them to come across as like, real human beings. So there you go.
Sorry, go ahead, Keisha.
I was going to say, if I saw this, if somebody pitched this in a room, like the Four Seasons, I would have been like, come on, that's too on the nose. That's so one-to-one. And Rudy Giuliani, like, we've used him enough. Like, it's a character, he's kind of a caricature. Let's get some more dimension. Nope.
I was there, and I have to say,
You were at the Four Seasons.
I was, and
Total landscape.
You could not have written anything better than that, comedy-wise. It was a sad little troupe of, I don't know, maybe like 30 people waving Trump flags and like 10 pretty sad-looking, like not real Democrats, but like people that just really want to yell at Republicans on the other side of the street, and then a paddy wagon and like 50 police in between them. So, and right behind a very small fence, and what was clearly and clearly reporters just jumping ship like just about every 2 minutes or so. So
The
I don't
50
think I
luckiest cops in Philly.
Yep.
How
To
did
get that
you know
assignment.
where to go?
It was very close to my house. So I saw the tweet from Trump come up in my news feed, and then I was like, oh, I gotta see this. I want to literally watch the fall of this campaign happen before my eyes. And you know what? I'm pretty glad I went.
Yeah. Look,
Oh
among
my
us.
God.
Look, in their defense, if any of us end up in the parking lot between a landscaping place and a porn shop in Philly, like you're a step away from the fall.
And don't forget the crematorium across the
Got the
street.
crematorium. Good point. So I think an important thing to put for context is like, we jokingly say a stupid coup. Like the odds are very low that Joe Biden is not inaugurated as the next president. Like what's happening, the stuff that's happening now is less about like, it's, to me at least, less about actually stopping him from being president and overturning the results, and more about, a group of Republicans wanting to keep a president with a large bully pulpit and a lot of followers happy by like sort of playing to his ego, particularly with 2 Georgia Senate races coming along the way. And B, it is to the advantage of a Republican Senate to have Joe Biden come in perceived as weak or potentially not, not a valid president, or to question that now. I think that's an important thing to set. Like there's a lot of anxiety and fear, and certainly, anything can happen. I keep reminding myself that until January 20th, this guy is technically legally empowered to just drone strike Wilmington, Delaware for fun. And there's not a lot we can do about it. But the odds of him not staying in office are pretty low. Yeah, I think I said that right. But
That was I think that was a triple negative in there, Tom.
Yeah,
but,
no, you get what I'm going for. There's gonna be a different old white guy in the office on January 20th. But I think in this moment, like, what else are we thinking? Like, I guess, and I'll turn to the rest of the panel here, like Chip, from a standpoint, what does it feel like to watch this happen in what is, considered to be the greatest, the most powerful empire since Rome?
Well, I think you want to make fun of it, but you're also nervous because you're like, this is reality, and I want to just cast stones and just laugh at it, but then it's like, could this really happen? And I think the thing that I try to keep in mind is like, you think about, who their enemies are and who can best who. And I think that's what it boils down to. So like, I go back to, okay, 4 years ago, this regime beat Hillary Clinton and the Democrats. But then 4 weeks ago, this team lost to Borat. So like I think we're okay. Like I think we're in, if they have the lawyering styles of the Trump family and Rudy Giuliani, and we have Borat on our side, I think we're going to be okay. Like I think, and that's what I go to sleep with at night.
Can we call this, by the way, Tom, can we call this a coup?
A what?
A coup?
No, we cannot.
I guess we can't. Mo ruled
No.
we can't. Sorry.
Robert Jones,
the
you've
most-
been banned.
Yeah.
Banned.
And I believe Mo, as a policy
I've
director, is the
been
most
banned.
senior person role-wise
I've been
on this
banned.
panel. Well, Robert's gone. We just
Robert
canceled
has exited
Robert
the
George.
conversation.
Shreya, we'll wait for him to come back. Shreya, what are your thoughts? What are you thinking as we watch this bizarre, slow-moving apocalypse?
On one hand, I get how it's just laughably bizarre. And as a result, it's like, of course nothing's going to happen. Like, they can't get their own shit straight. But I recently read Bassem Youssef's book. He's the like Egyptian Jon Stewart, and like pretty much every like dictator and tyrant has been laughably bizarre and like a total clown in their own right. I mean, one of the most feared men is Kim Jong-un is like a little baby clown, and like still is totally capable of nuking us to all holy hell. So I don't know if I'm like totally ready to write off what this administration is capable of. Clearly, they are capable of a lot of damage. I mean, we're what, like 100, 200,000 Americans dead already? And just because,
240,000.
right. So just because it's like a slow burn doesn't mean it's not still a shit ton of damage. And I feel like there's a lot more to come, and we shouldn't be too quick to write them off.
And another point is, and I know, and I was obviously I was joining in this, and I think it's Rudy Giuliani and the rest of this clown car is certainly deserves all of our mockery. What's not so funny though is that is that this president has, basically in the space of 10 days or so, has convinced a large majority of his party that that this election is in doubt. That there has been chicanery in there, that the actual voting machines may have been tampered with. Basically, they have convinced 60, 70, maybe 80% of the Republican Party that Joe Biden is an illegitimate president, and given how much the elected Republicans are in thrall to their base, which is in thrall to the current president, that creates a dangerous scenario, going forward. Come January 20th. Remember, Donald Trump has this little phrase that he pops into some of his tweets every now and then, where he makes a reference to your favorite president, right? And when he talks about himself in the third person, when he's talking with a supporter, he'll say, this burly union guy came up to me and said, "Sir, this and sir that," and so forth. Making himself like this vainglorious hero. Assuming that this plays out as it is right now, and he eventually, gives up the throne, he's going to be Biden will be inaugurated, and Trump will. They've already hinted that he's going to immediately announce that he's going to be running for re-election in 2024, which will, keep any other person who's thinking about running for president off to the sidelines. And he's going to start sending out tweets, which he's going to probably sign something like "Your President," your President Trump. So there will be a significant section of the country that will be immediately, automatically turning off anything that comes out of the mouth of Joe Biden, who is the President of the United States. And if Biden is trying to get cooperation from governors to either impose mask mandates or other things until the vaccine fully comes online, and they say absolutely not, because their supporters are Trump supporters, and their president has basically said, ignore anything that's coming out of the mouth of current Vice President Biden, President-elect Biden, soon to be President Biden. That is, that's kind of a recipe for disaster going forward.
I just would like to add one quick thing that speaks to everything you said, Robert. I fear the power vacuum of whatever's next.
Mm-hmm.
I fear it. This is unleashed and given air to the ugliest parts of America that we've never reckoned with. Still, a historic number of people voted for him and give life to. There are active white supremacist organizations that support him, not passive, active. And they are engaged, they are armed, and that isn't changing on January 20th. And that, for me, is the thing that keeps me the most anxious, because I think it's only going to be not necessarily exponential in numbers, but the messaging to them, whether it's going to be Trump or a Trump surrogate, is the damage is done. And the question is, how do you change that? And America is becoming more diverse. And I think it's actually throwing us into an existential crisis of who's human and who's not. And to bring up, you know, the naughty thing of QAnon, what I find so dangerous about QAnon is it's an active dehumanizing tactic. If I dehumanize people enough, I can kill them. I can no longer see them as Americans, and I can take their life. And what I'm profoundly concerned about is, how do we restore people's humanity so it's not people looking towards white supremacy, which is inherently dehumanizing, looking towards you're a lizard person, dehumanizing, you're armed and dehumanizing. So I think politically, yes, but I'm also thinking culturally, how do we shift this moment? And that's what keeps me awake at night, because that's the thing where, you know, we already have a mass shooting problem. We already have all these problems of rampant minimization and dehumanization. You add Trumpism to that, I don't know how we come back.
Wow.
Can we talk for a second about the fact that we just elected a QAnon supporter into office?
I did.
Why the hell are we talking about that?
I don't live in Georgia. But no, you're talking about, I think, Marjorie Greene, who just won a seat in the state of Georgia. This does speak to something I said back in 2018 when Democrats won the House, which is, remember, the House, whatever party controls the House, it normally wins, on the backs of the craziest fucking people they can find across the country.
Yes, that's. Well, I mean, the one reason why I'm not actually at this point freaked out about Marjorie Taylor Greene is, yes, she's nuts, but to Tom's point, the House always has really nutty people in there. I mean, the House had Congressman Dan Burton from Indiana, who brought a watermelon on, I think it was a watermelon, onto the House floor to show how Vince Foster could not have committed suicide. I mean, this
Did
was.
He hit it with a hammer?
Something like that.
That would have been great.
This was 1994 or 1995. What's his name? Jerry. Who was the crazy the crazy reality talk show host?
Jerry Springer.
Jerry Falwell.
Jerry Springer. You end up getting you get nutty people that come into politics. They actually get elected. Some of them get to some
Some of them get to be president.
But the House is designed, like, why I like the House more than the Senate is, like, you're like, all right, we can take a risk on this person for 2 years.
But here's the thing, they're given air by our current president in a way that feels unstable. That's the thing that feels different, because you don't, like, Trump's all in for her, and that's what feels off.
And are we ready for the Trump TV show where he's going to have her on like every week to talk about it, and then huge swaths of our country are tuning into this show for the next 4 years?
I'm not ready for it, but I
from
will.
what I understand, what's kind of interesting is it looks like initially I thought he was going to, like, try and get a majority ownership in OANN or something like that, and try and get that onto more cable on more cable networks. It now sounds like he's going to a brand new, like, streaming type of service.
Trump Plus.
Yeah, like, yes, exactly. Disney Plus, Trump minus, Trumpy Trump, Trumpy Trump TV, something like that. I'm not quite sure if that's better or worse. But the sad, and I don't know whether it's sad or whether it's tragic aspect of this is that aside from the country itself, the biggest victims of Donald Trump are Trump supporters. He he's grifting them, getting as much money out of them as possible. I'm on all these mailing lists because I used to be in politics and stuff. So
Right.
so I regularly get.
And because if you ever want to prank Robert George, just sign him up on mailing lists. It's delightful.
So I'm still getting mailing. I'm getting mailing lists. I was getting the last couple of the campaign. I'm getting all kinds of mailings from Trump and Trump related organizations, like every 15-20 minutes, and then I'm getting a bunch from Biden Harris / DNC every half hour and so forth. But the ones from the Trump people are still coming, and their headline is stop the steal, stop the steal. You have to read the fine print and realize that 60% of whatever money you send to help fight their legal options on the campaign is actually going to pay off their campaign debt.
Good business.
Yeah, no, I mean this is
like the improv school of.
And they've got this huge mailing list right now, and most of this is going to end up lining up the pockets of Don Jr. and Ivanka and Eric and so forth. I mean,
yeah. Not Jared, because I assume they'll let him be the guy that goes to jail over this.
Well, like father, like son. Yes, exactly.
I think, but that speaks to what I think I've been noticing. Like, there's been a lot of criticism of the rest of the Republicans. I think at this point, only 4 Republican senators have acknowledged Joe Biden's win: Mitt Romney, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Ben Sasse. I think, but it seems to me like my read on it, why and I think it's worth noting that Chuck Grassley and was it James Langford of Oklahoma have both said, they haven't acknowledged the win, but they have said that if the transition team does not start sending sensitive government documents to the Biden team, they will. Like, they'll use their powers in the Senate to do so as well. So there's been some tacit acknowledgement from them. It seems to me like the bind Republicans are in at this point in time is they want to keep those Trump voters, because those Trump voters probably delivered the Senate and the House to them this year, or at least close on the Senate, and helped increase their margins in the House. But they would like to be rid of Donald Trump. And I think if I'm Mitch McConnell, I would much prefer a world where I'm dealing with a President Tom Cotton or a President Marco Rubio than a President Donald Trump in 4 years. Even if Trump gives me everything I want, this is how crazy Trump was now. Imagine him 4 years from now when he's 80. It's going to be even worse. And so I think, to me, that's my read of why they're sort of well, we'll see. I don't know, this and that and the other, is they just don't want to poke that bear right now.
But they already have. I think that's the thing is not to drag a dead man, but John McCain even knew he touched something dangerous with how he ran against Barack Obama. Too many Republicans have been flying too close to the sun, and the part that enrages me, it's not about policy. It's not about government. It's literally about oppression. And it's so clear that it's the reason you can't touch it, because once you unleash it, it's really hard to put it back. And it's where chaos lives. And it is even more dangerous because it's OAN, sure. But what about Sinclair Media? There's so many large media organizations and pushes that are delivering messages that are tickling people's lizard brains, that they want that person. And the fear, they want the benefits of the fear and what it's stoking, but they don't want the figurehead. And I'm sorry, you've woken the beast. And now the conversations we have to have are about, how do we put this beast to bed? How do we take it out? Because that is shadowing and coloring every decision. Sure, you can have a Marco Rubio president, but you're going to have more targeted attacks against marginalized communities. And like, do we think Marco Rubio is really going to stand up to that? Like, and that's the thing that really,
silence on that.
but that is the thing that like enrages me, because it's not about the policies. It's not about the government, because even the things they may support will be twisted in the minds of people who are very frightening and dehumanizing. And that's the piece. It's like, I need the Republican Party to take ownership of that aspect, right? Just like I need the Democrats to take ownership of their own issues that oppress people. Like, I think people have to start taking ownership, because what's been let out is so dangerous. And we can talk about it as it relates to policy and who it impacts, but people will now make policy decisions based on who they think their voters hate as human beings, which is maddening.
And it's funny because if you look at like the demographics and how they turned out, Republicans actually got, they like the number of like Black Americans who voted Republican doubled. Same with Latinx people, I believe. And like, so they have made like inroads in traditionally democratic demographics. And like the smart thing for them to do would be like, oh, perhaps we should listen to what these people want and maybe tailor our policies towards them, and bring more of this group in and open it up to them. And I don't know, maybe let them vote a little bit easier.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen.
Sriya, it sounds like you read my column this week.
Yes.
Yeah, no, we all did. My Robert George Google alert went off, and I was like, oh, I got to check out this column.
But I mean, even Utah, you were talking about how like these, a bunch of like people won because, they have to appeal to like the Trump supporters in their place or whatever. But like, would Lindsey Graham really have won South Carolina if everyone in South Carolina could have voted?
Well, yeah, actually, probably. I mean, we're talking about South Carolina.
But if like everyone in South Carolina could have voted?
We're talking about South Carolina. Yes. No, I'm not making this. I'm not trying to make a gag. But yeah.
It was so close. Like.
Well.
I don't know. I don't know about South Carolina politics. Maybe I'm barking up the wrong example
but like
tree,
when you think of like more of your like, I think the disconnect here is Robert, rightly leaning to the fact that South Carolina is a more red state than other states. But I think if you look at like North Carolina, certainly, and a few other where ballots were thrown out at just by coincidence, mail-in ballots from voters of color just by coincidence seem to get rejected at a higher rate than white.
But that's the thing, like we have these like cemented ideas of what's a blue and red state, but like if everybody had like equal access to be able to vote, would that necessarily still be the case?
If Texas didn't have a drop box in the city,
right?
If Texas didn't have one drop box in Harris County, everyone at the same time. Sorry, go ahead.
I think one of the things we have to admit here, and I think, and this is something that the Democrats have made this point for some time, and I think this election sort of undermined this argument. The idea is, or the theory goes from progressives is, the more people that come out to vote help us, and Republicans buy that, and you can tell that Republicans buy that argument because they try and prevent people from voting. However, this was the largest turnout election that we've had in decades. Joe Biden got more votes than any president in history, and that's not just a factor. That's not just a factor of increased population. It's part of the turnout story. Donald Trump got the second most votes of any person running for president in history. And even though there was a lot more ticket splitting this time around than we've had in the past, Republican voters turned out. It turns out that there are a lot more of those white voters, predominantly white voters without a college education, but those white voters in those rural areas. And Donald Trump was able to bring them was able to bring them out. So just the idea that that we increase the number of the turnout is automatically going to automatically going to be a plus for Democrats. That's not an assumption. That's not an assumption that you can make.
And I know this has been a discussion for decades, I know, but is this a time with, like you said, with the splitting tickets, with I feel like the fracturing Democratic Party, the fracturing Republican Party, is this a time for a new party or a new party system to could there be a third party? Could there be centrist Democrats and Republicans, never Trumpers, and then is that something that you foresee at all? Or are we just in the two-party system for the foreseeable future?
Yeah,
I think that's a great question.
That's a great question, and I one of the issues that I've had, and I think Keisha and I have had these discussions on panels and off panels, is as well. Keisha made the great point a couple minutes ago about the fact that, or maybe it was maybe Shreya may have made the point as well, that the Republican Party attracted more non-white voters this year than it has maybe since 1960, when at that point non-white voters basically meant African Americans, and Richard Nixon got like 33% of the vote back then. When you're running against a Donald Trump who says regularly racist things, it's easy to paint the Republican Party as the racist party or the white supremacist party. But when that white supremacist party is expanding its non-white percentages, that argument becomes a little bit more complicated. You can still say it is the party that is preferred by white supremacists, but it is calling it a white supremacist party when at least maybe as much of a third of its voters are not white or don't necessarily identify as white. It becomes a more complicated argument, I think. I think for Democrats, and while we're going into this there's this debate going on amongst the Democratic Party as to how do they change how they deal with things like defund the police and stuff like that. I think part of that assessment has to be how they talk about this what used to be called the browning of America, but the increased diversity in America is, yes, it's becoming ethnically more diverse, but those ethnic groups are also becoming more ideologically diverse as well, and that is something that I think both parties have to figure out in terms of appealing to this changing populace.
Yeah, I 100% yes, Robert A. George. However, there's still right now leadership in the Republican Party right now is still more chill with Nazis. Like if Donald J. Trump, Proud Boys stand by, right? It's still a different thing, and it's like society. I think it's easy to be like, a lot of people of color did vote for Trump. And I think we have to have the conversation, why? What were the motivating factors? Were they single issue voters? Was it more complex? Was it the other thing that humans don't like change? Getting an incumbent out isn't typical, left or right, right? So to have the conversation around like what is happening in America, where I always say it's like there's different levels of white supremacy on both sides. There's being chill with Nazis, and like and that is a conversation of like, if you look at history, there were plenty of people who were apathetic to the Nazi party, and people who you would think shouldn't be. So that's a conversation. There's like 20 conversations we have to have, and it feels like the part that frustrates me the most, not as much of it's about the policy of what could make America great. And that's what sucks. And I think it's like, how do we have these conversations both left and right? Because I agree that the Democrats have a lot of assumptions around they own people of color's votes. And I think that's also white supremacy too. And I think it's a dangerous neoliberalism take on politics.
Joe Biden, you know, put his foot in his mouth and it got pulled out in time. But when he was on Charlemagne the God's show, when he said, being very flip, he said, well, you know, if you don't, you don't vote for me, you ain't black. I mean, he nearly really put himself in the middle of that, and there wasn't too much blowback from it. But there are. I have been on panels, and this is well before Trump. This goes back years, goes back decades, where very nice, righteous white liberals basically told me, that I'm not black because I'm Republican. And
I think I moderated a few of those panels.
Exactly.
And I hear that, and I hear how dangerous that, like, there's a dangerous white supremacy thread in liberal circles too, that I'm not holding them accountable. I hold them all accountable.
I think an interesting thing to Chip's question about third parties or the potential of that, I think what could be a positive byproduct of the Donald Trump era is that you have so many people who voted for Trump who would not necessarily vote for Republican. Like, you had a wave of activism on either side of the divide, either people who voted for Biden because they don't like Trump, who may still be involved now. And the thing that's interesting, I'd say going the opposite direction, I'm up here in, I believe New York's 14th is the district I live in, here in Parkchester, the Bronx, right across the street from AOC, where she, won this district handily, but is actually running behind Joe Biden in the vote here. Like, it doesn't matter because they both won. And this is a Democratic, I think, plus 30 registration-wise district. You have a lot, this could be the beginning of a world where, like, I'm not defensive of the two-party system. I think America likes Pepsi or Coke. Like, it's a very it's as much the fault of the voters as it is the system. People, like, I think most Americans are like, it's too many, Republican or a Democrat. Narrow it down to that. I can't decide. But you have so many people who showed up to vote in this election because of Donald Trump, one way or another, who
Yes.
were not necessarily beholden to the general ideology of either party. And hopefully this can lead to more people, and like my hope for outcome, like so many people, how many of you have friends who never cared about any of this stuff before, who in the last 2 years, like in the last 3 weeks, knew who their precinct captains were and like knew all of this stuff? I hope it sticks around, and I hope it leads to a broader diversity. I want to talk about two more things before we call it a day here. The other big news of this week, nearly every day this week, our nation set records in number of COVID cases. I think we broke the records daily 3 days in a row, if I'm not mistaken. At the same time earlier this week, Pfizer announced that they have there is a COVID vaccine that they have done trial runs on that has, I believe, 90% success rate. Those are really promising numbers. There's still a long way to go before a vaccine would be made available. They still have to do, I think, if I understand correctly, the next steps are they're still finalizing the test. They haven't finalized their entire test process, but this is at a point where they were comfortable releasing these results. Admittedly, 90% is what the company says. It could be less, but still, generally, these companies they might inflate the numbers, but they're not going to inflate it too much. After that, they'd still have to go through the CDC for potential emergency authorization. And even after that, the earliest that we could see vaccines, the most vaccines we could see by the end of this year, early January, would be about 20 million. But we are potentially turning a corner here on this, and not a moment too soon, as the cases are really starting to increase. We're seeing it across. I think Chicago is on a stay-at-home advisory. State of Iowa, North Carolina, Texas, Florida are seeing huge numbers. Here in New York, we may close the schools again, depending on what the increased averages are. This fight against COVID is not over yet.
I just heard quickly here today, Tom, that today's announced positivity rate was 2.5%, which was
here
a
in
dip
New York.
Here in New York.
Yeah, 2.47, but
yeah, which was the important thing was it was a dip from the last few days, and 3% is the trigger to close the schools. So the fact that it dipped a little bit is, fingers crossed, is a good sign. It may just turn out to be a blip, but let's keep our fingers crossed.
So from a lighting standpoint, I'm learning how I'm going to have things set up differently next week, because I look like I'm in the bars. That's a joke for anyone watching this. But thoughts in terms of a vaccine, like, that's the thing. Like, the good news is there could be a vaccine coming very soon. Bad news is the earliest that we could see widespread distribution would be the spring. And that's just a reality. That's not, there's not a system stopping. That's the reality of how much you can produce in time. And, the first batch would probably be reserved for healthcare workers, for at-risk populations, seniors, et cetera. Thoughts at this moment in time on a vaccine and the potential of COVID right now?
If it's not free, I think there'll be a revolution.
I think that's a fair point.
I think it will be, assuming it's going to be the Pfizer vaccine. There are multiple ones that could be coming online in this time. The federal government, the Trump administration, as part of their Operation Warp Speed, I think paid Pfizer $1.2 billion. Is that right? I think it was with a B. To produce X millions of doses, and which would allow those to be free, free to the public. Now, that, as Tom said, that's for the initial distribution, which is going to be going to frontline workers and seniors and so forth. The second, third, and fourth rounds, that's going to have to, that will be determined by a Biden administration, and obviously Congress is going to be involved in that in some way. So yeah, it should be. I mean, I think it's clearly in the best interest of the country to have that free, not just for individuals' financial situation, but just in terms of
in terms of public safety.
Yes, I mean, you want people, you want people to be vaccinated as quickly as possible without having financial interest in it. Given the fact that you figure that you're going to have difficulty reaching 30 to 40% of the populace, just because of the times we're in and the anti-vaccination movement and all these other factors.
I'm curious, and I don't like stoking conspiracy theories too much, but this one is kind of a fun one, which is just the President of the United States, again, as of this recording, still Donald John Trump, was quick to note that that he found it suspicious that a vaccine was discovered the week after the election, and I'm curious. I don't think it's true. I also, there's part of me that's like, if I could see Pfizer being like, let's just sit on this a week. Just either way, let's sit on this a week. What do you think? Do you think there's any credence to that?
I mean, like, logistically, it doesn't matter, right? Because it's still going to take until the spring anyway. And I think the benefit of having it after the election conversations is, like, it changes the conversation around it. So, like, they kind of got to avoid a lot of, like, it's already, like, crazily politicized, but they got to avoid a little bit of that by just like holding on to, because I mean, from our perspective, it doesn't matter. Like, we're still not going to get it. Like, the people on this call are certainly not going to get that vaccine anytime in the next 6 months. So, you know,
I am the closest person here to being a senior, so maybe I can just get a little bit of a nodge.
You literally elbowed us. You like went,
Get out of here.
Yeah.
No, I made this point. I made this point earlier this week that I don't think I think Pfizer, announced it when they really had gotten the notice that that their trials had suggested that the 90% number had been hit. I think actually the timing is best for all concerned in terms of trying to get this actually out to the public, because by coming in after the election, it allows people who are suspicious of Trump's shenanigans to think, oh, okay, it's coming from the pharmaceutical company, it's not coming from the administration, so I'm more trustworthy. I'm more trustworthy of this. On the other hand, the fact that it's being announced while Trump is still president, lends legitimacy to the Trumpists out there saying,
Yeah.
oh, well, it's a real deal because our God, Trump, delivered this. But most of the distribution is going to be done under Biden. So the Biden people,
Will be competent.
Biden voters are going to have confidence that it's a real deal and it's not just a political. It's not a political shit show. So that in terms of the public, the timing was absolutely absolutely perfect.
Now, and I don't want to sound like an anti-vaxxer here or anything, but I've just been listening to this conversation over the last few minutes, and you just keep talking, Pfizer this, Pfizer that, this and that, the doses. Have we totally moved away from the idea of shooting ultraviolet light into our bodies? Have we just forgotten that?
You're right, Chip. No one even bothered trying it once.
I mean, we're here. I have light. I can use that. I don't know why
Chip,
why don't you try it out and let us know how that goes?
Okay, I'll see if I can.
Chip, your lack of confidence in the bright light of the bright inner light is deeply disturbing.
I apologize.
well,
Actually, that was confidence in it, but I'll fact check you later.
Okay.
I mean, like, leading off of what Sherry was saying, though, like, I do think that there's going to be a reckoning depending on how the vaccine actually gets distributed, whether it's free, how accessible it is, things like that. Like, I mean, that's really, I think, of anything, like, that's really going to change how people think about things, at least in the more populated areas. I'm actually really curious to see how some of like these like smaller towns that like haven't really been affected and haven't really been like following the guidelines because they don't need to or they don't feel they need to, right? Like how it plays out there. But I mean, that's going to be a real big deal, and I'm worried.
I'm worried about it too because it's going to fall under a Biden presidency, and that will never go perfectly.
Yeah.
So you have to manage the expectation before it's happened. And I hope that Biden is already working on the messaging about how it's going to be bad regardless. Because even if it's free and it's just not going to go well, like people won't put a piece of cloth over their face.
Yeah. At the same time, I was going to say, at the same time, this is the, of the things they're going to have to do in their first 100 days, this is the one that they have more or less complete control over how to do it. They don't have to negotiate with the Congress on a distribution plan, if I'm not mistaken. They can handle most of that just through his executive power over the CDC. So I would hope at the same time that is the plan that they are trying to, that I hope at the same time they are thinking very much of the rollout of the Affordable Care Act website while they plan how they do this and how to work their way around it. One last thing to talk about today, and that is earlier we mentioned that Rudy Giuliani, leader of the president's legal team, we talked a little bit about his press conference last week at the Four Seasons. And Chip Chantry, you have turned lemonades. You've turned these lemons into lemonades. Talk to us a little bit about what you're working on with our friends at the Four Seasons.
I can also turn lemonade into a wonderful summer cocktail if that's something we can go. If you're looking for recipes, we can
Even
talk
better,
about that.
please do.
Have you on some other episode, please. Yeah, and I'd like to take all the credit for this.
Sure.
So I will.
Please do.
But no, I really have to give all the credit to my podcast partner, Jeff Lyons, who is an amazing guy, one of my favorite people in the world. We have a running podcast called Junk Miles with Chip and Jeff that we started a few years ago as a joke, which is a foreshadows to what happened. There's all these podcasts about running. We're both runners. I'm a comedian. He's a very funny guy. And he put out a joke that let's do a running podcast where we run while we podcast, and we'll have guests that have to run along with us. As a joke, he said that, and then I jumped on. I said, "We're doing this. You and I are doing this." So we have.
It's a running podcast.
It is a running podcast, and it's all about running. Now we did, due to some injuries about a year ago, we moved into the seated regular platform. But what started out as a joke is now a podcast, and he is my podcast partner. He was running with another friend of ours and said, "Wouldn't it be funny, because this whole Rudy Giuliani debacle with Four Seasons landscaping is so ridiculous." And for those of you who aren't that familiar with Philadelphia, Four Seasons landscaping isn't in Center City, Philadelphia by any stretch. It's 11 miles outside the city. I mean, it's in the city limits technically, but it's not in Center City. It's literally 11 miles from the Four Seasons Hotel. So he said, it'd be fun. Let's just run one day from Four Seasons to Four Seasons. He mapped it out on the internet, found out it was 11 miles. He loves to do that. And as a joke, again, put out to a few of us, to me and a few of our other runner friends, said, let's do this. We'll run it one day and we'll call it the Fraud Street Run, because we have the very famous Broad Street Run in Philadelphia every year. So the Fraud Street Run. And we said, oh, that'd be hilarious. Let's do it. We'll run it one day. And then he tweeted that out. And people were like, yeah, I'll do that. And we're like, okay, it's a thing now. We'll run. It'll be an unsanctioned run because we don't have any permits or anything. I was going to do a little Rudy Giuliani speech at the landscaping place at the beginning, and then we were all going to run down to the Four Seasons. Then he decided, let's turn something terrible into good. He said, we want you to donate $10 or $20 to sign up for this race. And all of the money goes to Phil Abundance, which helps feed the hungry in Philadelphia. So we've done a few of these little runs before. We've raised a couple $100 for some animal shelters in town, and $150 here, $200 here, these little things. A day after he did that, he said, we're up to $1,500 that we raised for Phil Abundance. And then all of a sudden, the Philly Inquirer picked it up. A couple of the periodicals, Jake Tapper from CNN picked it up and started
Robert's old buddy.
about it. Yeah, right. Yeah. So Tapper was an old Philadelphian himself, and it just went nationwide. And then we said, it just sort of got out of hand. We're like, we can't have this many people with COVID. We can't have this many people together. So we said, we're going virtual. So it's not an official run. Go run wherever you want, run your 11 miles, or just pretend, because the whole thing was a fraud anyway with Rudy. So like, just pretend and lie that you're going to run 11 miles and just donate to Phil Abundance. As of right now, between the t-shirt sales, because we put t-shirts up that you can sell, between t-shirt sales and the donations, and we started this on Monday, this past Monday, we've raised just over $30,000 for Phil Abundance, which is kind of crazy. And I will bow and take all the credit for your applause, but it's really just people across the country have just we're blown away, just to have latched onto it. And I just thank all these people who have donated, that we've turned something so ridiculous into something good. And I think that's the bottom line. There's a lot of eyes on Philadelphia right now. And I grew up here, a lifelong Philadelphian. And it's one of those things where we are, I was quoted the other day as saying, we're surly, but we're helpful. And I think that's something that we can live with. And it's one of those things where it's like, we saw this Rudy Giuliani thing. We wanted to be snarky and stupid, but like, hey, let's take the upper hand instead of like there's always the thing of they go low, we go high, which I love. But at the same time, we're still going to go low and make fun of it, but we're also going to go high. Like,
Right. Yeah.
both.
You're running and punching in the nuts at the same time.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think it's, it's that thing where people, if we just said, hey, we're doing this thing, we're going to raise money for Phil Abundance, blah, 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 we might have made a couple $100 or maybe a couple $1,000, maybe. But I think it's almost people donated out of spite. Like, don't forget the power of spite. And people are like, no, screw you guys. We're going to donate to this good cause. And so we're just blown away. So it's been a little crazy. If anybody wants to donate, you can go to junkmilesshow.com. It has all of the info there. There's t-shirts you can buy on TeePublic, Fraud Street Run t-shirts that are also on junkmilesshow.com. And you can find us on Facebook and Twitter and all that. But yeah, we're kind of dumbfounded. We just thought we were doing something stupid, and luckily we've made some money for a good cause.
It was like you did the inverse of what Rudy did. He thought he was doing something smart and
doing something grand
that would make him money and help people, and now he's dumb.
Yes.
And you thought you were doing something dumb. Yeah, see, good things happen all over, and good things happen in Philadelphia.
There's
and with
more Philadelphia than that.
That's right.
That is as Philly as it gets. And with that, we will call it a week for this week's episode of Electoral Dysfunction. This was a great conversation. Thank you so much, panel. Thank you, Mo Manklang Kingston. Where can folks find you on the internet if they want to hear more of your opinions or comments?
At Mo Manklang on everything.
Excellent. Chip, where can folks find you if they want to yell at you or support your various schemes?
And I encourage them to do either. Instagram and Twitter at Chip Chantry, just all one word, at Chip Chantry. I also have some comedy albums out. You can get them wherever you get comedy albums.
Excellent. Shreya, where can folks find you on the internet to register their agreement?
I am at Shreya Sarkar 7. Good luck typing that in properly. Yeah, I was gonna make a joke about my Zoom improv show, but that's not really a joke anymore. It's just so tragic.
Yep, the greatest joke of all. Keisha, where can folks find you on the internet or more of your work?
Keisha Z on Twitter, Keisha Zoller on Insta, and you can always watch Astronomy Club on Netflix. It's a fun bop. Less than 2 hours of your life. About 2 hours of your life. It's fun.
It's the best 2 hours I spent in 2020, hands down. And Robert George, where can folks find you?
So you can find me, Rob George, on the Twitters, Rob George 29 on the Instagrams, and I have a feeling that I'm going to be dabbling in the Instagram thing a little bit more in the coming weeks. Stay tuned on that. And also The Opinion, which is the Bloomberg Opinion Twitter as well.
All right. And you can find me on Twitter at Brennanator, on Instagram at BrennanatorGram. That is it for this week's Electoral Dysfunction. Other quick thank you to our friends Declan Shalvey and Jordy Belair, who created the Electoral Dysfunction Eagle. Thank you to Joanne Harris for our show theme song. Thank you to Kevin Scott for our show animation. Thank you to Ned Thorne for helping me put these together every single week. And now to play us out this week, we're going to kick it to some friends of ours, some more friends of ours from Philadelphia. They are the femme foursome and purveyors of pussy pop rock themselves. Ned Thorne, star wipe us to girl poop.
Good morning. It's 8:30 a.m. But I just want to stay inside myself. Inside myself. It's the morning and I'm feeling horny for myself. And I don't need help. I'm gonna bang myself. I'm gonna beat the beaver. Gonna push the bush. Slam the clam. I'm gonna linger for as long as I can. My pussy is popping. I'm doing a drop in. Now I've got moist thighs. I'm gonna fuck myself. I'm gonna flood the basement. Gonna give myself a hand. Give myself a hand. It's 8:45 now. I just don't know how I'll get to work on time. Supposed to clock in by 9. I'm gonna screw myself, get lost in the deep end of my personal slip and slide. I'm gonna bang on and reckon with my vagina. I'm officially tardy. My pussy's having a party. I'm thunderstruck because I just got fucked.